Can you believe we started Interview Boss in 2021?
Not really. It's insane. That's a lot of episodes and a lot of hours of talking.
Oh my gosh, it is. And if you're scrolling through all of our episodes, you might scroll straight past something that you really, really needed.
Yes, we're always getting messages from people asking us to do an episode on something, and I'm like, we already have.
So we've put together playlists to help you find the episodes that are exactly what you need, suited to your situation.
They're all categorized. If you're applying for jobs, we have episodes about resumes, cover letters, job ads. If you've been offered your dream job, we have episodes on resigning, exit interviews, and how to impress at your new company.
And we even have a very special playlist that's very popular for if you have an interview coming up immediately and you need just our most recommended hard-hitting episodes between now and then.
For all our last-minute listeners. It's all there for you. You can browse by category and check out all the playlists at interviewboss.com.au/podcast. Great question. I think Cut that out. Don't leave this in. I need a minute. Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Interview Boss. My name's Emma. I'm a third-year journalism student who's teamed up with my sister to give you advice, inspiration, and support when you're looking for a new job. Sarah is a HR and recruitment professional, and together we're excited to give you guys all the tips, tricks, and behind-the-scenes knowledge to help you in your career.
Hey Em, and hello everyone. Now, in this episode, we've got a really exciting announcement. But we're going to make you wait right to the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around.
That's right. We're going to be a bit clickbaity, but we promise it'll be worth it, so stick around. Let's jump in to our Shoot Your Shot shout out for this week. This week's shout out. That was horrific. Shout it out. Maybe we should put Reese Maston's song to this in future.
We should.
Yeah. Anyway, this week's Shoot Your Shot shout out goes to our listener, Jess. Jess landed a job in PR and communications in the travel industry, and she says, 1 month and 6 interviews later, I got the job. Thanks so much for all the tips and help. It really got me in a better place of mind for interviews. I was so much more confident and had a different mindset. I start in a month.
6 interviews is insane. Well done for sticking through that, and congratulations, effort. Jess. We both did a little happy dance when we read that you got the job, and best of luck in your new role.
Now, to kick off today's episode, we're going to dive straight back into the interview content because we're Interview Boss and that's what the people want. So in today's episode, Sarah will be asking me some popular interview questions. We're going to be doing a bit of a mock interview, so I'll be giving real answers, and Sarah will give some feedback. Now, important to note here, we see a lot of advice, and I'm doing inverted commas, you can't see, but advice that circulates online of people being like, here's the best way to answer this question. And they're just generic, buzzwordy answers. And it kills me and Sarah, because imagine if every single person just goes into the interview and answers this generic, like recited answer to popular interview questions. Like, it's just not it. So if you see,
I believe I have all the requisite skills and experience for the level of this role. Like,
it's just you end up saying nothing.
Say anything.
Yeah. Anyway, if you've listened to us for a long time, you'll know we're not about that. But if you see any advice, inverted commas, circulating like that, run and come to us. So instead of doing generic answers that everybody can just copy, we're just going to give you a real life example of me. So we're going to pretend that I'm going for a radio announcer job because I'm in radio. That's my, media industry.
So what we're going to do is we're going to try and make this as realistic as possible. So even though this might not be the area that you're going into or the job that you're going for, still listen, because we're going to show you how Emma has taken her, top important things that she wants to mention and made sure that they come up in her interview answers. And then you'll actually hear her responses and we'll workshop together, how she might have improved a particular answer. I think what's great about this is you often don't ever get to hear someone else being interviewed because you're never going to sit in, not many people sit on interview panels. So you may not know what it sounds like and how your interview answers come across from the other side. So you'll get to see the difference between, good, better, and the best.
Yeah. So if you've listened to our episode about preparing for job interviews, we talk about how instead of going into an interview and, coming up with these scripted, buzzwordy, generic, wishy-washy answers, and instead of preparing for what they might ask you, you want to do it backwards and you want to pick your non-negotiables that when you walk out of there, you have absolutely mentioned those amazing things you've done and you've worked it into whatever question they've thrown at you. So
yeah, because the thing is, they're trying to get to know you. That's the point of the whole interview. They might have picked a particular question. They're just trying to ask you questions so they can get to know you. So the point isn't to get the exact specific scenario to respond to them in the moment off the top of your head. The point is to get across your best bits.
That's right. So I've picked out my best bits and then you'll see how I work these into the interviews. Now, I haven't prepared. I'm going to just be impromptu rolling with it, whatever questions
Are you a bit
Sarah
nervous,
asks
Em?
me. Nah, I think I'll do okay, but it is a bit on the spot, so I hope people are nice. But here are my non-negotiables that you're going to see me work in. Number one, so I freelance write for a local arts and culture magazine named Coal Coast, so that absolutely has to get mentioned. I had a business administration job in my gap year and I was dealing with big sums of money, so that's something notable, offer skills and stuff. My job in commercial radio, obviously in the promotions team, that is obviously going to be a major thing I talk about. Also this podcast, and then we have Country Kid, because if you've listened, I like to throw that in, and hospo work potentially. Hospo work is a bit don't have to, but these are things that I just think these are experiences that are worth mentioning.
Yeah, that you really want to talk about. And your degree, I think, as well.
Oh,
obviously.
Yes. I always forget about that.
You want to throw that in there. Once you get it, right?
Yeah.
You haven't finished
I've nearly
it
got
yet.
it.
Okay, cool. So we're going to jump in. So I'm going to ask the question, you respond, and then once you're done, let me know that you're done and say, how did I do or something,
Yeah.
and then we'll jump into kind of dissection mode. So I've got a couple of questions here. I've based these off of some job descriptions that I read online about, a radio announcer, what they're looking for. But I've also kept some of them a bit generic, again, just to make sure that they're really relevant for people at home who are listening. Okay, so we're going to kick off. So thanks so much for coming in today, Emma. So I guess to kick us off, I'd love to know a little bit more about you and what's brought you here.
Absolutely. So ever since I was little, I used to pretend to be a newsreader. I used to make my family sit through news bulletins. I was always fascinated by storytelling. And then growing up in primary school and high school, I just loved English. I was always writing and public speaking and just had such a passion for that. And when I ended up finishing school, it was time to think about what I wanted to do. And I thought, yep, this is definitely my calling. I just know I want to do something to do with communications and media. And then I made the move to Wollongong from my small country town in New South Wales to study a Bachelor of Journalism, minoring in International Relations. And I absolutely have loved that. And in my first year of uni, I was fortunate enough to get a part-time position for the local radio station in the promotions department, and that has just been fantastic. I loved getting on air. I loved the experience. And that's where my passion for radio really sparked. I always knew I wanted to be in the media industry. I was open to working anywhere, but having now been exposed to the radio industry, I am just in love, and it's my dream to be a radio announcer. So here I am. I'm done.
Amazing. That was really good. I was a bit worried there that when you said in my first year of uni that you were going to talk about your hospo job, I was like, no, leave that out. This is like highlights reel only. Yeah, great. I think you probably could have clarified going into the before radio thing. I think that it came out in the end, but you didn't kind of say, I knew I wanted to be in media. And then when I started, that's when I discovered that radio in particular was the thing that I was most passionate about. You got there in the end, but you could have set that up a little bit better. I think if you're practicing that again, I'd definitely mention that. But yeah, great. I think that when you're a kid, love that section. If you got rid of anything, you could probably cut it down, make it a bit punchier. I'd get rid of the high school liking English
Yeah.
and public speaking, or you could just throw that into the kind of the one sentence when you were a kid.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to blah, blah, blah. And through school, I always liked English and public speaking. It kind of felt like we started when you're a kid and then we moved forward into high school, but nothing really changed. It was just like more of similar stuff. But yeah, I think people listening will really appreciate that shows your career journey. It's a real story. It's engaging.
Yep.
And I think people are going to remember that as well. Cool. Let's move back into interview mode. So Emma, working in radio, things can move really quickly and communication within your team is really key. Tell me about a time where you've communicated really well with your team.
Absolutely. I've seen firsthand how fast things can move in the radio industry. In my current role in the street fleet, in the promotions department, we're often sent to various events and to client functions and things, and it's our job to really communicate with all stakeholders. So we'll arrive to a location, we've got to call the client contact to meet with them, we've got to chat with them about what needs to be done, then we've got to liaise with whoever we're working with. We might also have to check in with our sales department who sort of is managing the client and check in if they want anything added, anything done. So communication is really integral to the whole operation. But I guess a particular example would be we were running an Australia Day event in Wollongong. It's like a big, the council puts on this huge event for the community, and 2 street fleeters were on in the morning and 2 were on in the afternoon. So prior to our shift in the afternoon, we were calling the morning shift people. We were checking if they had run out of ice blocks, how many more water bottles they needed, if we were out of tattoos. We were also calling our boss who was down there to say, what's the parking situation like? We would then have to call the client contact for parking and say, yep, we're going to bump in now. Constantly communicating, and it just makes it all run so smoothly. And in the end, it was a huge success. That was so long.
That was good. Okay, yeah, you're right. It was a bit long. So I really love that example for people at home listening. The first bit compared to the second bit. What was more engaging, do you think?
I don't know.
So the first bit where you talked about overall, I have
probably
to...
Probably the actual example.
Contact. Yeah, right? Because I can when you said, the tattoos, the drink bottles, whatever, I can see that in my mind.
Yeah.
I can see you calling, asking for parking. It's Australia Day. There's stuff going on. I can imagine what's going on. When you did the first bit, it was good. Like, you ticked the boxes, but it doesn't paint as clear of a picture for me. So I think you want to do both, because you don't want to get only on examples, because people think, is that the only time that you've done that?
But I could have condensed the intro start.
Yeah, you could do it 2 ways. So you could either say at the beginning, a summarized version of what you said. So, working in the area that I do, I loved how you gave a background of what that role is. It's important for us to be on site. We've got the client contact. We've got our boss. We've got other street fleeters who might be there. So we have to check in with all of them. It could have been as short as that, right? And then you go into your example. Or you could have worked in your example throughout your story. You can do that as well. So the client contact is someone who's really important for us to check into at every event. And so at this event, we called them to ask about parking.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? You can kind of work it in. But I think it'd probably be best to do the general part. I have to communicate all the time to make sure things run smoothly, particularly in events. And then a specific example was Australia Day, blah, blah, blah. It all went great.
Yeah. I also thought of really another thing that I didn't say there that I could have said is that being in the street fleet, we work weekends, we work Saturdays and Sundays, typically when events are running, and there's no one in the office. So if something goes wrong, I'm the one that needs to communicate with stakeholders and solve the problem. Like, there's no one to call in the office. Communicating well and following the instructions is essential, because there's no backup plan. I'm the only one to deal with it.
I think that's a really good example. And I think if you were to say that again, you could throw that in there. You'd have to weigh out whether the Australia Day example's better than that, but you could maybe work that in, because I think in this job, if you imagine, there might be occasions where you're early in the morning live on air or whatever, and the person who you need to talk to or whatever isn't necessarily there.
Yeah.
or something goes wrong, again, live on air, and you haven't got someone to ask, hey, what do I do? You've got to make a really quick decision on the spot. So I think that'd be a good skill to kind of show off. But yeah, great example, really good answer. Hey, Interview Boss listeners, if the podcast just isn't doing it for you and you need way more help to prep for your next interview, we have the perfect thing for you. Interview Academy. Em, tell us all about it.
This is huge. This is the love child of Sarah after doing hundreds of one-on-one coaching sessions, finding out what people struggle with the most, common mistakes. Sarah has created the ultimate course that you can do in your own time, self-paced, heaps of modules, videos, interactive quizzes, a workbook that will become your Bible by the end that you can take with you into your interview, because if you're a long-time listener, you know that we endorse taking notes into your interview. It's a game changer.
Check out more about it at interviewboss.com.au/interview academy. I think we're getting some good, juicy learnings for our listeners here. Okay, back into interview mode. So Emma, tell us, what do you think are your main strengths?
A strength of mine is definitely my sense of initiative when it comes to problem solving. I'm not someone that likes to sit back and let a problem bother me for too long. I like to think of solutions. An example of this was in my job at Allied Grain Systems as an administration assistant. We were responsible for capturing $1 million projects to charge back to commercial clients. And we had this spreadsheet system that we had to use to capture all the costings. And it was really ineffective. We were making mistakes often. Our boss was getting unhappy. And it was just an absolute pain to navigate. So I sat down with my manager and asked if I could take a couple of days to just design a whole new spreadsheet, because it was going to be so more effective that way long term. And we did. And my boss was so happy. And yeah, when you're dealing with $1 million sums like that, you need to be accurate. So I was really proud of the way I showed initiative to tackle that problem. Another strength of mine is my ability to collaborate. I have always worked in hospitality, in fast-paced environments, and you really rely on teamwork in an environment like that. Really thrive working alongside other people, so that's definitely a strength. And lastly, I'd say a third strength is I don't know. Let me think.
Shall we stop there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Such a good example. This question sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
How much harder is this to answer than every other interview question?
Oh, I read
about
it
your
wrong.
strengths?
I thought it was said, what are 3 strengths? Okay, I could have just left it there. I was trying to come up with 3. For some reason, I thought you said, what are 3 strengths?
What are your main
I did
strengths?
fine then. Okay.
Yeah, you did. You didn't need to have 3. You didn't even need to have 2.
Right.
And that would be my main feedback. I really liked how you gave an example. I think people find this question really hard because they've got to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Pick something tangible that you've actually done and use the strength that's at the center of that as your answer.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, I'm reliable. Like, okay, well, what's the story about you being reliable? It's easier to talk about your strengths when it comes to an example as opposed to talking kind of abstract about yourself, because it feels really icky and salesy. Like, I actually think the weakness question is easier than the strengths question.
I disagree. Anyway.
It feels like a bit of a brag. But yeah, you absolutely didn't need 3. And everyone, you saw there what happens when you draw a blank in an interview and your brain panics and you cannot think of anything else. So I would say when you're going into an answer like that, plan out what are the 3 things that you're going to say first and then go into the answer if you can in your mind. So if they did ask for 3, you'd go, okay, I'm going to do, what was the first one? Initiative, collaboration, and then the third one. And then try and keep them in your mind if you can. If you're online or you've got a notepad, I know, right? If you're online or you've got a notepad in front of you, like jot them down if you want. I think it's fine to take notes in interviews. I doubt they'd ask for 3 though. They'd just say, what are your strengths? And then you just
anyway, next, come on. get to it.
Okay. So the natural follow-up to that question, Emma, what about your weaknesses? What are the areas, that you think you could develop in?
And can I just say, whenever I get asked this, I want to scream and punch them. But anyway, back to interview setting. I think a weakness of mine would be I'm someone who really thrives off positive praise. I'm a people person and bit of an extrovert, really love, words of affirmation. So I think sometimes if I feel that I'm not getting enough feedback or, good feedback or just feedback in general, I can sometimes get a bit unmotivated. Now, okay, I'm finished, but I didn't know what to say for this one because this is a question that in the past I've told you I hate and I don't know what to say because you panic because you're like, oh, quick, say something so they don't think you're up yourself. But
Righto, here's what I'm going to ask you. Is that true, what you just said?
Yeah.
Perfect. Then it's the right kind of answer. The most important thing that you're looking for with this question, and I've asked lots of hiring managers this, and it'd be like, if you ask this question, what are you looking for in the answer? They're looking for self-awareness. They're not looking for red flags at all. It's not a question for red flags. They're looking for self-awareness. If you can come up with something that's considered, that's actually really true about something that's, a bit of a personality trait of yours or something that you could work on, that's great. A great answer for them to, particularly if they're going to be your manager, for them to know, okay, Emma likes feedback. I need to check in and let her know how she's going, good, bad, or otherwise. Otherwise, she's going to feel like she's in this on her own.
Yeah.
So really, really good answer.
Great.
And you don't have to make it long either. I think the length that you did just then was great. You could have thrown in like, what are you doing to work on it, or how you've become aware of it, something like that. But again, not absolutely necessary. Again, what they're looking for is self-awareness. You could have just said simply at the end there, so sometimes, if I find I'm in that position where I'm not getting feedback, I will actually go and ask, hey, can I just check in and see how I'm going? Easy.
Yep.
Cool. Let's do another question. So, Emma, how do you manage competing priorities or when you've got multiple things to do at once?
Great question. I am someone who personally has a million things happening at once. I like to keep busy, so I feel like I've gotten pretty good at this over the years. But I really think it comes down to prioritizing what's most important. I like to make lists, figure out what needs to be done the soonest, but also what's the most important. And I think a good example of this is when I'm writing an article for Cold Coast magazine. I have a lot of competing priorities. I have to write the interview questions and I have to send them off for approval, and then I have to actually conduct the interview. And then I also sometimes have the talents manager, so say I'm interviewing a band, the manager will be in contact with me saying, can you please include this information in your article? And my boss is also saying, we want you to include this. So I'm dealing with multiple things at once, trying to keep everyone happy and incorporate this all into my own work. And now I don't think I really have answered the question here.
You got to keep going.
Hang on. And so while at times that can feel a bit chaotic, I just make sure that I am communicating effectively with everyone and I seek feedback a lot, or I'll get really clear on deadlines. So I'll make sure to ask my boss, when's the deadline for this? When does this need to be done? And I'll then I don't want to answer this anymore. I don't know.
It was good, everyone. What do you reckon? I think that was a great answer. I think you got a little bit lost midway. So you were going down the path of I write lists, I get deadlines, and then you got lost when you were going through the process of how you write an article. And then it became
because I was trying to prove that I have lots of different things to do at once and I have to do it all.
Yeah. But I think what you could have done instead is say, sometimes I've got an article to write at the same time as I've got an assignment to do. I think that would have been a better example to use, because you were kind of like competing priorities, yeah, but it was almost like managing stakeholders that you kind of had that
Hang
answer
on,
for.
let's do this again. I feel like I can do better. Okay.
Let's go again. And this is let's see if she improves. So, Emma, how do you manage competing priorities or when you've got multiple things to do at once?
You know what? I've completely had an epiphany. I'm going to completely change the way I answer this. Absolutely. So I'm a very busy person, always have liked to keep myself busy. For example, I study full-time. I also have a part-time job. I also have an internship where I write articles on a freelance basis. Have just committed to starting a 3-week full-time internship with Win News. And I run a podcast. So I am extremely busy. And I guess the way that I keep all that in check is I'm an avid list writer. My diary is my holy grail. And I also will rank things out at the start of the week in order of urgency, what's going to take me the longest, what can possibly wait, and what are the more things that are non-negotiable, like a deadline for an article. That's going to come first over maybe watching lectures. And I really like to just write up little timetables each week and block in all of my obligations like work so I can get a visual picture of how much free time I have and what else I can commit to, because I'm sometimes guilty of overcommitting. I probably shouldn't tell them that.
Perfect.
I'm not guilty.
No, that's fine. Again, they get a bit of self-awareness. They get a bit of the truth in there. Much, much better. You didn't lose track and you were really clear on where the answer was going. And also it was probably a bit shorter as well. Sometimes the danger with trying to say too much is you get lost, you waffle on, and you don't have a concise finish. Yeah. Think about shortening your answers instead of trying to get as much information in as possible. I love what you did there. I often hear people answer these kinds of questions by talking in general. I think you've just got to work out what's most important and, it depends really, sometimes things can wait. You're not giving me anything. And I find I get kind of frustrated when people answer like that because I'm like, okay, well, I still don't know how you manage this. When you gave examples like mapping it out visually, writing lists, prioritizing things, those are all strategies that you use to get on top of this. And it's a way of giving me an example without saying, an example would be blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I mean, you did use the example of what you've got going on in your life and your calendar in general. But I think if you can give practical strategies that you've used or things that you've done in the past, that is great. Just try not to be too general in those questions.
Yeah.
And too philosophical, I guess. Yeah. But awesome. Great. Answer. Much better the second time.
If only in an interview you could be like, hang on, let me just do that again.
Let me redo that.
Forget what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, you could. If you get stuck after the first sentence, you probably couldn't do a whole answer and then ask to answer it again. You could do the first sentence and be like, actually, do you mind if I start again? I just really lost my train of thought there.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. People know that happens. They're totally fine with it. What I would say is don't get to the end and say, oh, I haven't really answered. Did I answer the question? I just feel like that just gives off the wrong vibes.
Yeah. Even if you feel like you didn't answer the question, just don't say that. Just act confident.
Yeah. Yeah. Either fix it or just end it confidently and kind of move on. Yeah.
Okay. Next.
Okay. So this is a bit of a radio specific one. I thought I'd throw in.
I'm ready.
So, Emma, we're looking for a really distinctive on-air presence for our listeners that really naturally appeals. How would you describe your on-air personality?
Great question. I would describe my on-air personality as quick-witted, funny, relatable, entertaining. In my podcast, Interview Boss, that I launched with my sister in January this year, it's all about support advice for job seekers, and so Sarah's the HR recruitment professional, and on our website she's listed as the brains and I'm listed as the banter, which I think really sums it up. To back that up though, it's not all just jokes and fun. I obviously have studied my degree in journalism, so I would describe myself as being accurate, having an understanding of the journalistic codes and ethics, like standards of practice, really across defamation laws and stuff. So I guess I would say professional, educated, but fun and witty.
Great answer. That was great.
Woohoo.
And I get a little fuzzy feeling thinking that one day in an interview, this podcast is going to help you get a job. And they'll be like, have you heard a podcast? That was really good. And imagine they listen to this interview. They don't even have to actually interview you.
Yeah, right.
So great answer. I think what I really liked that you did there, and you almost forgot it and then you caught yourself. You explained what Interview Boss is. When you're bringing something up for the first time, really important for you to say, oh, my podcast, Interview Boss, and explain what that is, because people aren't going to have context for what that is, even if you're talking about an old company and stuff, unless it's like one of the top 10 most well-known companies in Australia. Give some context on what that job was or what you did. When you talked about your role in promotions, you did that as well. Really great. I think you tried to add a bit too much on there at the, but I'm also professional.
Yeah.
You were kind of
I panicked
correct.
that I was like being too funny, and I was like, fun. But I'm really good too.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And
don't you think it's still good to mention that?
It is good, but I could see...
Not just as a last desperate, like, wait.
I probably see what you were doing. I could see the panic in your, but wait, I'm also professional. There's nothing wrong with that. You just probably could have been more succinct with it. It did sound a bit like, but trust me, I know the ethics.
Okay.
You're kind of like, the ethics and the codes and defamation. You kind of just threw that in there instead of putting that in like a proper sentence. And defamation is not really a...
Yeah, okay, come on. Next.
No, that's okay. It was a really great answer. I'm nitpicking here because that's literally what we're here to do. Okay, so we're going to finish with one of the curly questions that we had. Again, please don't judge me on these questions. These aren't necessarily what I would ask Emma in this situation. This is like what lots of people do ask. I personally never use the old strengths and weaknesses. But again, we're here to give advice to you guys, and I think this is what you're going to run into out there in the field. So this is a curly question for you, Emma. What would you rather do? Do the job right or on time? You can only choose one.
Really tough question, and I think we can all appreciate that both are very important in different circumstances. It is a bit situational, but I think for me, through my bachelor's degree and the training I've received in codes and ethics, I think I would always pick getting the job right compared to on time, especially in our industry where, what we say has implications. We're broadcasting to thousands of listeners. We are a source of credibility and news for a lot of people. People rely on us to be accurate. So absolutely in this industry, I will always pick getting it right and perhaps being a bit later than being the first one, but having my information wrong.
Love it. Great answer. And we edited the little bits out where you went to do the answer and got a bit lost. And I can see what you were trying to do there. You were trying to kind of say, well, it depends, and sometimes one and sometimes the other.
But it was just fluffy.
Don't get caught up in that. You did it right in your last go there where you said, look, sometimes it's going to depend on the situation. You can absolutely throw something in there like that, saying, obviously, sometimes deadlines are more important.
Yeah.
But they know that. They know that already. They don't think that they're not now going to think that you're always going to get everything in late. Like, they're not going to think that. They want to see the reasoning why. That's what this question is about. Like most of the curly questions, it's the reasoning, not just the answer itself. And I think your reasoning there was really sound, and it was based on the implications for what something could go wrong if you don't get something right and you worry about it being on time instead. So great answer. Did really well there. Don't get too hung up, on trying to say, oh, well, sometimes this, sometimes that. Again, like that kind of people pleaser thing comes out of like, I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing. Don't worry about that. Pick one. You're going to come across much better if you stick to an answer and go for it.
Great. Now that concludes our little mock interview. How did I do? What would you give me out of 10? Would you hire me?
I would. I would give you a job. And I
Woohoo.
think anyone out there who's listening who needs a radio announcer, Emma's your girl.
Yeah,
Go
hit
for
me
it.
out, please. I graduate soon and I'm in the middle of a pandemic and I'm stressed. Anyway, okay. So that went well. So happy with that. And just to link back, at the start, remember I told you my non-negotiables that I was going to mention? They were the freelance writer, the business administration job, my job in commercial radio, my podcast, being a country kid, and hospo work. And I mentioned every single one of them.
Yeah,
So-
you did. Maybe, not sure about the hospo work. I don't know whether that one came up.
Maybe not. Oh, I thought
Yeah,
I
but
mentioned
again,
it
you
in a
said that
team
was-
environment. But that wasn't an absolute necessity. That was just if it comes up.
Exactly. So you can see how instead of picking, how do I answer that question? Emma's thought about it backwards. Okay, how can I work one of my examples in for this question? And if you've gotten to the end and they ask you a strengths question and you haven't mentioned one of them, right, well, now
Yeah.
you've got to work in one of your top things that you haven't mentioned yet to your strength somehow.
Yeah.
And that's how you got to think about it. What haven't I mentioned yet? What do I want to make sure
And how do I
comes
mention
up?
that? I think once you start thinking like this, it becomes so easy. Like, I'm 100% confident that they could ask me anything and I'll find a way to work it in. Like, those questions they asked me weren't
Yes.
explicitly asking for me to give
Exactly.
an example or talk about my work, but I just did it anyway. And yeah, once you master that, the job
And if you
search-
know your experience inside and out and you've focused and spent heaps of time not thinking about the questions, but thinking about what are the things you've done, brainstorming, okay, Australia Day, that's a good example. I can use that for something. Jotting those things down, creating a mind map, whatever your process is, if you know your experience really well, you'll have an answer for every question that they can throw at you. So I hope there was something in that for you if you're listening at home. Really great examples of really common things that people do in interview questions. Emma's already pretty good at public speaking and talking, given what she does for a job. But I think we got a lot there in terms of ways that you can improve your answers, ways that you can think about things. Short and brief is always going to be a bit better. They can always ask you a follow-up question if they need to. But if you waffle on for way too long and get lost and you waste some, too much time, then they may not get to the key content that they wanted to cover.
Great. And now it's time for our big announcement. Sarah, what's our big announcement?
Well, as of today, when this episode goes live, you will be able to book an interview coaching session with me for an hour, one-on-one. We'll be on a video chat and I'll take you through interview questions specific to your job. I'll give you feedback that's just for you, and you'll set yourself up so that you can absolutely nail that interview that you've got booked.
Absolutely. If you're someone that lacks a bit of confidence, doesn't have much experience, is just feeling a bit defeated after lots of knockbacks, and you're just looking for a little bit of help, Sarah is your gal. Now, we have a form where you can go on, you submit the job ad for the job that you're interviewing for, your resume, like all this information, so Sarah can get a perfect picture of your goals, what you want to get out of it, and she will then have the session with you where she can prepare you for all possible interview questions they might ask. She'll draw on the experience you've got and help you come up with your story. It's going to be so good.
And it's all recorded, so you can watch it back.
Yeah.
And what I find is that you don't need one of these for every interview you go for. This is kind of like a generic session that will help you get your storytelling, practice some interview questions, understand what bits of your experience that you want to pull out, and also your kind of unique struggles. So some people will struggle with confidence and they'll struggle to be concise. Some people will struggle, with not being too general, and they've got to give more examples. So we'll go through what tends to happen for you when you get nervous and turn that into a strategy to make sure you succeed. So this is something I've been doing a little bit for friends and family when they asked, but I thought it was time for our listeners to put this service out into the world. So the website is live. You can go to www.interviewboss.com.au/coaching. And we thought for the month of September, it's our launch month. We're going to give you guys a discount. So if you use the code LAUNCH20, you'll get 20% off an interview coaching session with me. And all you have to do is book that during September. You can book it for later on if you've got an interview coming up later on if you want. But yeah, LAUNCH20 will give you 20% off.
And here's a little shameless plug of some clients that Sarah has recently coached, and they have great things to say.
Hey, how's it going? Jay here. I just wanted to say that if you do have an opportunity to sit down with Sarah one-on-one, do it. I was deep in the job hunt a year ago, struggling with interviews, not getting callbacks, until I got an opportunity to sit down with Sarah, and she went through my resume, my cover letter, and completely blew my mind and turned it into a masterpiece. And then when I actually was getting job interviews, she would sit down with me, and she really helped me structure my storytelling. She made it sound really easy, and I really appreciate that, because honestly, I would not have gotten the job that I have now without Sarah's help. So 5 stars from me. Thanks, Sarah.
We're so excited to announce this. We hope you guys are just as excited as we are. And I guarantee, that's what we also guarantee. We guarantee you'll find it valuable. And if you don't, you get your money back, because that's how much we believe that this will be such a beneficial power hour where you can take control and master that interview.
Yeah, and I'm not going to promise anyone that you'll definitely get the job if you have a session with me, and I actually don't think you should trust anyone who tries to guarantee you that you'll definitely get the job. It's just not possible, right? You have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. But make sure that if you're not happy with what you got out of the session and you don't feel like it was worth it, well, we'll give you a full refund and apologize for wasting your time.
But that won't happen. Anyway, www.interviewboss.com.au/coaching, and we'll pop that in our show notes. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in your ears next week.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Interview Boss. If you like hearing the sound of our voices, hit that subscribe button in Apple or follow us on Spotify. Or even better yet, tell someone about the show. That's how we hit the charts and can help even more people. For more advice, inspiration, and a supportive community, check us out on Instagram.
If we've been your job search besties and helped you in some way, there's a cool way you can support the show. Shout us a virtual coffee.
We get a huge kick out of reading all of your success stories. Head to buymeacoffee.com/interviewboss and shout us a cuppa.
If you keep us caffeinated, we can keep the content coming.